I do nothing.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, my dear friends. On behalf of the Federation of Film Societies of India and FIPRESCI India, that is the India chapter of the International Federation of Film Critics, we welcome you all here today in this fantastic program, Face to Face with Girish Kasaravelli. This is a part of the ongoing film festival being held by FFSI, where we are showing a retrospective of the master director. This conversation will be done by Professor Manu Chakravarthy, eminent educationist, and who is also a member of FIPRESCI India. We know that many of you are waiting eagerly to listen, and you will have many questions also. But we would like to request you to shoot your questions after the conversation is over. Otherwise, some questions may be lost. It is better when the conversation is over, then you shoot your question. Thank you, Girish, for coming to this session, and thank you, Manu. So you are a member of FIPRESCI India, so this is our privilege to have Girish for this session. And Federation is also very much thankful to both of you. So I am now leaving, and the entire floor is yours. Thank you very much. Please start.
Thank you, Premendra. We both thank FSI, the Federation, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Start it.
Okay. Well, I welcome Girish to this program and welcome all of you here to what I think is an exploratory discussion. So I'm trying to make it a conversation where Girish will reflect on his creative processes. Well, most of you would have watched his films, and certainly FIPRESCI, FFSI have organized a retrospective. 3 films have been running. I'm not going to the exact details of the films, of each film for that matter, but I will try to raise certain conceptual questions. And a master filmmaker like Girish is at liberty to answer these questions. Actually, they are remarks, statements. They're not even questions. So it's more in terms of Girish making a journey back into the mid-70s when Gatashraddha was made. The first 3 statements will be on the 3 films that have been featured in the retrospective: Gatashraddha, Thai Saheba, and Kanasemba Kudreveri, Riding the Stallion of the Dream. And then the other films too would figure. So let me repeat that it's not going to be a very specific analysis with the details from each films, but a rather conceptual journey where Girish will reflect on his cinematic career, on his creative processes. Well, let me begin with that phase when you made Gatashraddha. Well, Samskara had come, creating quite a sensation for whatever Samskara was as a film. And you had worked as an assistant to B.V. Karanthi in Chomanadudi, a fairly well-organized film that was around 1975. But I want you to respond to 3 frames of reference that I think constituted the core of Gatashraddha. One, I think, was your own exposure to Indian and international cinema, especially what I thought and I still believe continue to shape you in many conceptual ways. Not to say that you are copying or imitating, you have moved in very different directions, but if one should trace influences, well, Italian neorealism or the Japanese masters, Kurosawa, Ozu, filmmakers you have admired, and certainly Satyajit Ray. Well, but when we come to Katashada, it was a wholly new kind of experimentation, exploration, discovery in relation to the ethos of Kannada. Second, so talk about those cinematic influences and how you were trying to weave your own structures of experience, imagination when you made Katashada. Second, in a cultural sense, if this constitutes the cinematic background in a very general sense. Second, I think, as a very serious student of Kannada culture and especially of Kannada literature, I think the Navya ethos, the modernist phase, and especially somebody like Ananthamurthy, did matter to you quite a lot. So, a certain kind of cinematic sensibility and a certain kind of aesthetic, literary, creative sensibility where you drew many things about Kannada culture. These were two influences. And the third, I would say, is something very unique. Because you see, when I look back, except perhaps for, in fact, and so on one hand, if you have a certain kind of influence, cinematic influence, international cinema, which came to you as a student of FTI, where you did your diploma. Second is the literary sensibility. But to try to relate you to the Kannada cinematic tradition, I would say that you were quite an outsider, and the idiom that you introduced in Gatashraddha, I would say was very unique and in a very philosophical sense, quite alien to the Kannada cinematic sense. So let's begin here and ask you to make your journey 40 years back and reflect on these three things.
Well, I would like to start with certain images that recur in my films. Let me take the last shot. Yamunaka is there, crying under the tree, and Nani starts walking away. They pull back, back. Finally, at one stage, Nani stops and turns to look at Yamunaka, who is totally covered in the shadow of the tree.
And it's a long shot.
Probably my cinematic journey is that. It's looking back at my own times and my own, environment and my own backyard and see what is happening and what is going wrong and what are the strengths. It's in a way understanding these things that is happening in our life. Well, you asked me about the cinematic influences. Well, as you know, I am from a small village. I was never exposed to cinema till I joined the student. Why I joined is a sheer coincidence. I'm basically a pharmacist and I was supposed to go back for M pharmacy. Instead of that, I applied for FK and got it. Till I joined Film and Television Institute of India, I hardly seen about 20 films. And film never impressed me. But my exposure to cinema in Film and Television Institute of India is something that really made me what I am. When I started my film, there were many influences. One is my training at Film and Television Institute of India, where we are exposed to great masters, both Indian as well as European, American, their idiom, their philosophy, and we are also exposed to serious cinema with a certain historical perspective, not as an isolated creation. If you see a film, you would like also to see what has happened before, what is going to happen in the future. Socio-political realities, what is happening there, where it was created.
So a historical, political, social contextualization of the film.
Film is very, it was quite important for us. And we always prefer to watch films in that sense. When I came to make films in Kannada, my influences were Kannada literature and whatever little I have gained in film and television. But that particular era, say I passed out in 75 December, and in 76, mid 76, I started shooting my first film, Kasaravelli. Still, the FTI, this one was still there, Bigger was still there. It's also the time.
But you had also done Chomana Dudi with Viveka, and you were an assistant.
I was the associate director for the film. So there are very influences working on me. In Kannada, this new literary movement had possibly speak the way of movement. In theatre, we had Samudaya with the leftist organization named Truth, Entire Sense, entire state of Karnataka that inspires people about the various social political issues. Outside Karnataka, in cinema, you had the new cinema movement in India. I was fortunate enough to see some of them even before I joined FTI, just 3 months before I joined FTI. And new kinds of cinema emerged in all other regional languages. Still then, good cinemas were being made only in Bengal, and some in Hindi. But that was the time when you could see new talents emerging from other regional like
The Indian languages.
Malayalam, Kannada, Hindi, Marathi. That was another influence. And outside the world cinema, the neorealism has created new wave as using its
The French New Wave.
And the political cinema of the third world was gaining ground.
The Latin American
cinema was gaining ground. And that was also the time when our attention was drawn to the cinema of Latin America, cinema of Africa, cinema of other Asian countries, not just Japan, other Asian countries. So that was another thing which was working on me. And the political scenario, we were just, emergency was over and people were trying to had an anti-establishment attitude, right? So, they wanted to do something different. So the Janata experiment was there, Janata Party experiment was there. And that was the time, if you come back to Kannada, Kannada Navya movement was actually heralded by the people who were socialists, basically, Lohiites, not socialists, Lohiites. So they were looking at our society from a different perspective, not merely a Marxist perspective, but a different perspective, wherein both class as well as caste played major role. And they were actually directly attacking the hierarchical structure of the society. And all these influences were working on me when I started. And in Canada, I made my first film in 77, but Samskara had come in 70. Samskara, Domanapuri, Radu, and few others have slightly paved the way for me to make the film. That's how I began my film. So that's why I said, looking back at his whole, growing up years. So we all look at what are the influences that worked, and if you, it's already 40, 50 years now. 40 years. So if you have to look
77, 43 years.
So all these things made a bigger impact on you.
Yeah, one thing, Girish, 1 minute. Girish, when you will be speaking, please look at the camera. Otherwise, your audio is not clear.
Okay.
Because you are looking at Manu, so audio is also going to him only, not to us. Okay. So when you will be speaking, just look at us, that means to the camera, so that your audio will be clear. Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
Let me ask you to dwell a bit on the FTI years for a simple reason. I think that was also the training ground for you to be specific about frames, about mounting, about montage, about mise-en-scene. And there I think we should also remember how cinema used to be analyzed by somebody like your teacher Satish Bahadur and others. So talk a bit and then we will turn to Gatashraddha. But how your own analysis, much before you became a filmmaker, how your viewing of the frames of cinema, of construction of narrative structure. Now, what can you just go back to those training sessions?
See, in the film institute, I am from a science background. When I went to film institute, the first cultural shock was, like my professors would say, you won't come out with the answer, we won't give you anything. So, the moment a film was screened, all of us, there were only 11 students in the batch, in this department, 10, 11, 12. We had to develop our own argument in favor of cinema or criticizing cinema or analyzing cinema. And it's in a way, nothing is given. They only help you unearth certain things, meaning the idiom. They would say they would introduce us to film theory, but then they would ask us to, find meaning in these classes. That way, a film institute training helped me a lot, helped anyone a lot, because they were allowed to wander into the world of cinema and discover the idiom, the philosophy, the aesthetics on their own. See, if one is trained in the film, in the industry, if someone comes up the ladder, then what happens is he would have understood only the technical part of the cinema. Here, apart from technical aspects, you also try to understand the aesthetics behind the technique. We would be told about various film theories, and from that light, we had to understand these idioms, these technical details. So that was actually a great insight, great visual into my filmmaking career. In fact, it was not just technique for technique's sake. We had to, in fact, look for this technique in painting, in literature, in theatre, and in other cinema, and find out how this technique has evolved. Like, say, for example, if you are talking about German expressionism, it's not only just camera technique. We need to understand what socio-political situation promoted German expressionism. Similarly, what are the things which promoted neorealism? So that's how my understanding of cinema and my idiom developed.
Now that we are referring to your idiom, let me, based on my own understanding of drawing from my experience of watching the films repeatedly, I would ask you to respond to these three statements of mine. One, I think, you see, every film of yours is based on some text. But the point is, for somebody like me, having watched your films, reviewed them, and then having visited them several times, I respond to this statement of mine that when you quote a text, a literary text, your preoccupation is already with the modes of transference of the written word into your visual image. So your fidelity, now if people have problems with you not being faithful, as those words are always used, that there is no fidelity, I would say that there's a different kind of fidelity at work. That your fidelity is to the written text in terms of the visual image that the written word produces. So you're already making a journey as you're going to the written text. You're already making a journey into visual images, into the world of metaphors and images. So that's a different kind of fidelity. So the literary text, my argument would be that you're not faithful, but you're transforming it. That you're creating a metamorphosis out of the written text. So one doesn't match it, saying it's not there in the text. In fact, there is an enhancement. Anandamurthy himself has recorded it several times that Gatashraddha has gained, his story has gained more. He offers several concrete details. Second, and so the transference, your preoccupation and your fidelity as a filmmaker is to the visual image, and you make a journey into the world of metaverse. Second, you're already, and we will discuss it in relation to the other texts, you're also not bound to the thematic structures of the text. In fact, the way Gatashraddha Anandamurthy's story ends and the way Gatashraddha the film ends. So there's also a thematic. One, there's an aesthetic transference, metamorphosis. Second, there's a thematic transference. Because if we look at Anandamurthy's story, it ends with the young child spitting at the entire Agrahara. But here, when we turn to Gatashraddha the film, it's a look of compassion, of understanding, of empathy towards Yamuna. And therefore, it's also the possibility of a new future. And that's also the journey that the woman is going to make in the coming generation. So there's an aesthetic metamorphosis, there's a thematic metamorphosis. Third, I think what's important in Gatashraddha, because I think you should also deal with the craftsmanship. Gatashraddha is a very organically related film between the thematic pattern, your narrative structure, and the images you craft. I think it's a very, very organically related film in the sense that there is such an organic evolution between the thematic structures and the images you are trying to craft. And more importantly for me, that there is a certain austere quality in Gatashraddha, because you are dealing with a widow, you are dealing with the Agrahara, the whole context Agrahara, to talk of contextualization. So the whole structuring, the lensing, the angle of the film, I can point out to several shots. There's a certain organic, austere element to your visuals in Gatashraddha. So I want you to talk of, let's begin our conversation also with reference to how you make an aesthetic transference, that your fidelity is to the visual world, to the visual cosmos. Second, that you are interested in thematic transferences, metamorphoses. Third is that your whole visualization, the manner in which you craft images is also related to the context. And therefore, in Gatashraddha, you have a very austere, a very pious kind of cinematic narration. I would like you to respond to these one by one, the three points that I have asked you to respond to.
Well, whenever I pick up a film for film cinematic adaptation, what I would look for is, first thing is how effectively it can lend itself to cinematic expression. Because not all great works lend itself easily to
Cinematic adaptations.
Because in cinema one has to express it through concrete images. In literature you always express it through words or abstract words. So in literature, from abstract words you are trying to create a concrete image. In cinema, from concrete image we are trying to transcend to an abstract meaning.
But there's always that relationship between the concrete, the physical, and the abstract.
We can never make a film without this concrete details. But if the film just remains in concrete details, then there's no cinema, there's no art at all, there's no excitement.
Which, if I may ask you to respond, is also one way of culturing realism.
Yeah.
That it's realistic, but you're also culturing it, and you're converting it into a metaphor.
So, I was very lucky in that sense in picking up Gatashraddha as my first film, because it had all these things which I am looking for. One, it should lend to cinematic adaptations, and Gatashraddha lend itself beautifully into cinematic. Second thing, I look for it. Will I be able to make some intervention into the story, not the faithful adaptation? If I don't want to intervene into the film, if I can't intervene into the film, then why make a film?
So you have to create your own
something,
spaces.
I need some pointers within the film, within the story, on which I can develop my vision of
shall we say that you look for your creative autonomy in the
In
text.
the text, you are right. Yes. So there again, I found a lot of elements to get into the story, cinematic interventions. Thirdly, I look for how strong the ideation level is. On is it ringing in truth as far as the political, social, ethical insight? And then comes the structure. Is it? Can I make a very beautifully structured? Another the advantage is that the story itself was beautifully structured. Gatashardas, it's actually anybody would have made a great film with that film. It's actually for a newcomer that's the right thing. I started working on the script, and then suddenly I realized how beautifully the story is mounted. It has a lot of elements, thematic elements, which work very well. Like say for example, you have two principal characters, Yamunaka and Nani. They look like mirror image of the same kind of exploitation or suppression. But each of them have their own answers, each of them have their own way of getting trapped or getting released.
Their own existential realities.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's whatever happens to a Yamunaka, it's reflected in Nani's life in another way. Say for example, now Yamunaka, she's a widow and she is now pregnant. And because of her pregnancy, she is going to be outcast in the society. So that is constantly working on her. And when we come to Nani, the other very metaphorical action of the same thing happens with Nani. He is being the Shastri, make him touch the Naga stone, the serpent idol, and thereby he is trying to subjugate. See, there are two forces working. One is the real tragedy of human, and the other is the very symbolic reason of man. And how do they come out of that? Yamunaka succumbs to it, and Nani tries to come out of it in a way. So this whole process, in the beginning, first half of the film, Yamunaka gives all her motherly affection to Nani, who is sick, who's a young boy has been brought to the institute, the school. He's missing his mother. He finds mother in Yamunaka. In the second half of the film, Nani thinks that it is his duty to protect her. So he becomes he becomes adult. He grows, he matures into adult. It's not a very, I'm not trying to say it's a good development because somebody is forced to become mature. That means his childhood this one is totally lost. But if you look at the character, Nani has grown.
It's also his initiation into adulthood.
Now he knows it's his duty to protect. This works very well in the film. And in this process, I was actually wondering, what is it? So whenever we look for a kind of a thematic construction, for some ideas, from where we can draw certain ideas from it. I was narrating this story to my brother, who was a doctor, a painter by hobby. He said, look for Kundalini. In Kundalini, we have these elements, which helped me a lot because I got all my idioms from there. One, I decided I will not resort to acting because then heavy emotional
Dramatization
would have made it very dramatic. I didn't want that because I wanted kind of a very subtle, controlled, restrained acting so that audience can interview into the head. So audience can own it's not imposed emotions. You have to own the emotions. So we decided to have a slightly non-dramatic performance. That's stylistic. Second, I was discussing this with my cinematographer, Chandra. Since it's about a ritual, should we think of a ritualistic construction? When we zeroed in on this notion, it really worked very well for us because then the drama is then utilized and the structure of the film is defined. Instead of directly getting into the action, like a ritual, you will go around and round and round and then finally get into the core. This, in a way, takes you in a different kind of a journey altogether. It's not a very dramatic journey. It's a kind of a
ritualized way of
taking this. So I would call it second. I used to call it as a ritualistic cinema. Third, now this is decided. We also decided we should have constantly tracking shots, moving shots, so that we either get into the character or get out of the situation. So if you look at the camera, in the beginning, you go in, because you get into the money as it becomes, from a this one to a Watu, the priestly. So you have different kind of movement, and then towards the end, you go back, because you see the flash. So that's why the last scene, for me, it's very significant because I didn't want to use the image that Anandmurti used, wherein Nani spits when he comes to know that Urupa is getting married, because that action is too, it's not subtle, it's too direct. So I want it,
and also it forecloses the possibilities
of a growth
of alternatives of looking for ways out of the situation.
See, what happens in the literature, you are looking for an image which immediately expresses it. But here, since we are working with the concrete details, we have to look for images which are ambiguous. So I use this scene wherein Nani goes back and looks at Yamunaka. Probably when he grows up, he will have a different approach. He won't be anymore. He won't be a Shastri or a Udupa or a Vajra. He will be a different man. Because this experience has made him a different man. So even if you look at the whole film, not only camera movement, even the compositions are cyclical. Because I also, it's a very strong belief see, for example, in Vishwata, they all live in Agraharas. Agrahara is another motive for me. They have the temple in the center, and all the four sides are the houses. Other community people are not allowed to come inside. So that means it's a enclosed space. And I'm also talking about a subject wherein everything is enclosed. They're closed, so there's no opening. And when Nani comes out, that's when we see the whole large expanse of the world is beyond. So this kind of structural elements I get from this. So I was looking for dramatic intensity. I was looking for critical insights. I was looking for compassionate understanding of the situation, characters, and I was also looking for strong emotional quotient, and ambiguous not in the negative sense, but what is the right term? Is it?
Well, it's a certain kind of ambivalence.
Ambivalence,
Not
ambivalence. Ambivalence. Wherein you keep it open it. So our style, our compositions, our resourcing, even our rhythm of the film, this helps us on this too. So that way, yes, I think work very well because of these kind of such.
Let's turn to the second film in the retrospective. I turned to Thai Sahaba because that was the second film in the retrospective, and people watching may want some reflections on that. You see, Thai Sahaba arrived in 1997, by which time you had already done Akramana, Murudarigalu, Tabrana Kate, all those things. In Thai Sahaba, you turn to a very different sense of history. Katashada has one sense of history, rooted in the Agrara. But you turn to a larger sense of history in Thai Sahaba. The freedom movement, the nationalist movement, land reforms, and Appa Saheb as an idealist making his journey appearance, participating in the nationalist movement and also trying to bring about land reforms by giving away his own lands. So there is also a public narrative to Thai Saheb. Thematically, again, very different from the novel on which the film is based. It's also an inner journey. So if you have some kind of a public narrative, you also have a journey into the life, the existential reality, the existential dilemma of Narmada. So the visuals of the film are also, you will see, for me, Thai Sahaba is something of a film that moves into the spectacular realm, not like a Gatashraddha. There's some kind of a large vertical structure. If Gatashraddha is mostly horizontal, Thai Sahaba also has vertical structures, vertical movements, and there's something like a spectacle because you're also operating with larger forces, issues of history. And therefore, you see, when you look at these, what do you think was the journey you made through the other 5 or 6 films? So what was your sense of cinema? What was your sense of imaging? Especially when you dealt with larger historical structures. Because the mounting of Katashraddha, and if we look at the mounting of Thai Sahaba, they're very different and diametrically opposite. And Thai Sahaba is also a very cerebral, intellectually constructed cinema. So can you talk about the journey you have made, not just in thematic terms, but also in terms of your cinematic understanding, the development, the growth, the shifts you made when it came to visual narration, visual narratives. So again, 2 questions for you, 2 statements. One, the journey you make into larger forces of history, because you may see later on that you are journeying into questions of history, modern history too. Second is, what shifts were you making as a filmmaker when you turn to your visual narration, the visual narratives?
When I made Gatashraddha, I was fresh from the history. In fact, my approach to cinema, idiom, and dealing with space and time and permutation, combination, that was not puzzling in its sense. I was not interfering with the space in like the way Eisenstein used it, because we all thought that is too much of a manipulation of the emotions and the space. So in between, I had to pass through various other, even when I made Tabarana, I was totally used the Eisenstein construction. But when I came to Thai Sahaba, I said I would abandon all these styles, start finding my own methodology of expressing things. In a way, Thai Sahaba played a major role in my cinematic journey. I was this actress Jaimala asked me whether I can make a film with her. She and the main role. I had read this novel by Ramsha Lokapur. Ramsha Lokapur is one very interesting novelist, writer in Canada that takes up various court cases and turns it into fiction. This is one such court case which he has come across and then turned it into this one, work of fiction. I made this film in 1987 when India was celebrating 50 years of independence.
1997.
97. So then it bothered me. What did this 50 years mean to me? What did the independence movement mean to me? Not me, that's not person, for my generation, for my people of my community. And I started developing the story into my various parallel threads. I brought in, of course, I was not in the original novel. I brought in various other elements. Because I wanted to talk about in retrospect, understand what it meant to us, the freedom movement and getting independence. And that's when I thought, probably locating this in the Nehruvian era, which is the first phase of Indian political movement, I thought to throw a lot of lights into the various lives, not of Thai Sahib alone, but of our generation together. I set it in, it starts with the death of Gandhi and ends with the death of Nehru. And that was the period that Indians' social life has changed a lot, complexion for society. As he pointed out, that the Zamindari system has been abolished and people started looking for other kind of people. Kena one was there and Tenancy Act, Land and I thought I'll make all these things. All these things happened during this period, for this 20 years, exactly 20 years, 64 Nehru days, and the film ends with the Nehru death. But I won't show any of these actions, but I will only show the reflection of that as it is, comes percolates into the water. So it's essentially a story of journey of Thai Sahib. You see two kinds of journey in Thai Sahib. One is inward journey, one is outward journey. If you look at Thai Sahib, in the beginning, she's all by herself. She wants to take up herself, she wants to look good, she wants to impress Appa Sahib. So she puts on all the jewelry, puts on, wears beautiful saris and things like that. But towards the end, the color has gone, she comes to white sari, version and all that. But inside what has happened, she has become, the exterior is become colorless, but inside she has become more and more profound, more and more.
Because she's
Manu,
also.
one thing, Girish sir, please, again, when you are speaking, you are looking at Manu and the audience are complaining continuously, we cannot hear anything. Please look at the camera while speaking, don't look at him. Manu's voice is very clear, he is looking at the camera. Okay.
Well, I'll ask you to watch me there. Let's get the link again.
You repeat your answer.
What I'm trying to say is, because you see, most people would see it as academics. No, I think you're dealing with cultural politics also. I don't think it's me as an academic talking to you as an institute filmmaker, because I think several issues dealing with our culture, what we would call cultural politics, also figure. So let's be a little serious about these things. And I think FIPRESC is interested in promoting such a discussion. Now, let me come to this issue. One, Appa Sahib, Nehruvian period, transformation, Zamindari system, making way for distribution of land reforms. These are historical questions. But you see, Thai Sahiba, not educated, very educated, with no sense of history, she is also making a journey into history. And in that sense, the film and the character, the protagonist, Narmada, is also breaking caste barriers. That's why when she goes and holds hands with a lower caste woman and dramatically steps out of the Wade. And out of the Wade, which is a fortress, is also her movement into history, into modern history, which also means she's disinheriting, disowning her own caste privilege, her own class privilege. This is also part of cultural politics, but what I would also like you to reflect on is that this Tai Saheba, unlike Gadashraga, the film, I mean, also has a certain spectral quality, certain huge quality, because you are also dealing with modern history. So it's a different kind of visual experience for us. And her evolution is not through theory, not through intellect, not through academics. And that's why I said it's not a mere academic discussion. It's also stories. It also tells stories of how different women have evolved very differently. So you can also say that this is an experiential overall negotiation with modern history.
See, what happens in film, Appa Sahib is a staunch Gandhian. He has a lot of Gandhian ideals and he wants to implement that, but he's never able to implement it. And Tai Sahib doesn't understand any of these things. But through experience, she tries to achieve, she achieves whatever Appa Sahib wanted to achieve. So this is two kinds of, this one. And Appa Sahib gets crippled and he disappears towards the end of the film. We don't even know where has he gone. But if you look at the journey of Tai Saheba, she has, in the beginning, she wants to look pretty and she wants to seduce him, she wants to look attractive, she wants to possess him, and she doesn't want him to go with his Chandri. But as the film moves, she somewhere starts disowning all that, discarding all that, and starts becoming more and more Gandhian. In the sense, she whatever Appa Sahib wanted to do, Tai Sahib does it. Appa Sahib is not able to. Has not been able to do that. As you rightly pointed, she accepts Chandri. She abandons. She gives away the zamindari in the film. She becomes a normal man, a normal human being. She even tries to nullify the adoption. What happens is, very interesting this one, because Appa Sahib was reacting to all these principles through his
theoretical and idealism.
Whereas Tai Sahib was reacting to it through heart, through feelings. So, for me, I ask this question, which is more important? Who is more successful? Is Tai Sahib or Appa Sahib? I also bring in between Akka Sahib, one who renounces this world. According to me, that's not the right approach at all. Renouncing the world, according to me, is not. So I'm a little critical of Appa Sahib, but I try to understand this journey of Tai Sahib. A journey of Tai Sahib who goes in a palanquin to meet Appa Sahib, Akka Sahib. She goes to meet Chandri and by foot. She goes to meet, search for Appa Sahib on a private bus, and she takes all kinds of physical movement. But meanwhile, there's also an inward journey. She becomes more and more mature. She becomes more and more compassionate. She becomes more and more understanding. This journey, I place it in 1950s, from 1947 to 1964. The story. That's also the period for me. It's when this landed gentry, they have lost their lands, so they started interacting with the world outside, and it's a different kind of political. This one is emerging there. And also, I comment upon one thing. If you remember, towards the end, she wants to annul the adoption, and finally she meets a crooked lawyer who says we have to do immoral things. In the sense, we have to change the records so that we can
annul the adoption.
No, it's a loss of principle, loss of morality, loss of ethics. And that was also the time when we see this. From Gandhian era, that loss of ethics, loss of moral, loss of principles, and it is going down and down and down. That's I just wanted to place that with these developments in the in the field. So that for that reason, this journey of Sai Seba was very important. Did I make myself clear? There are two kinds of journey. One is inward journey, one is outward journey. And outward journey, she moves from in the from her attire, from very colorful dress to white. From inward journey, she becomes more and more mature. And this journey also in a way reflects what is happening with the Indian politics. See, there are a lot of things which I wanted to see in the film. I don't know how, I think I got all those things. See, how do I bring this out, this journey? My color palette. If I am talking about idiom, color palette, from very colorful dress to white. And towards the end of the film, you don't see much color. And what about the movement? She comes out of the water. She, that walking out of the water, it's slightly celebrated in the film. Because for me, it's not just Paisava who is walking out of the house. It is that particular class which came out into the public. Because after all, I don't know whether people agree with me or not, the freedom movement, especially in the South, especially in Karnataka, basically was middle class men who were participating. Very few women participated. So the women who came out into the public, this one was in this period. And of course, and later on they became more and more into the public space. So when I was working on this, I was looking for leitmotifs which worked out these things, and I found two leitmotifs. One was the water itself, the enclosed space. From enclosed space to open space. The film starts with the enclosed space and ends with the open space. And the second thing, I was just wondering, I was talking to my wife, Vaishali, she was actually from that area. She knew that place very well, that water culture very well. I said, tell me one small detail which can work as a leitmotif in the film, work as a metaphor. She said, the first one she said, Atta.
Fragrance.
That fragrance, I believe, I'm not from that area also, I was not very familiar with that, but she's from that area, she knew that. Landed gentry, they always had used attar to show that they are slightly different from the rest of the common.
Certain class consciousness.
So that shows the class. So I thought, it's a brilliant metaphor, brilliant treatment. I used it right through. And in fact, when Manu wants to get away from that, it's actually the attar which holds him back, which puts him back into the system. Attar is not natural. Body odor is natural. Attar is
an extra
synthetic, which puts on oneself to look beautiful, look appealing, and which makes them look different from the rest of them. But towards the end, Manu says, now I smell of liquor. She said, even that I can accept. And that is the journey of Taisai. And that's the journey of the people who moved, not just Taisai, women of that period, who moved out of this folds of the house into the.
That's why Sai Saheba also becomes Ai, mother.
Mother. She becomes.
But it's not mother in a patriarchal sense. It's a mother who gives a democratic freedom to the individual who is getting married to the common human being. And so you also have that magnificent shot of Nanu trying to remove the fragrance, of trying to get back to the earthy smell, as it were.
So that's how, for me, that journey of Sai Saheba is not just anybody, individual's journey. She becomes a this one of the entire period. What image she is actually personifies the vision of that particular era.
You know, it's also your journey into the world of the commons, the commoners, from the Wade, which is almost like a fortress, sealed off from the common world.
She achieves this not through conflict, not through, friction, by eating it. In fact, that's one thing which I work not only in Sai Saheba, but the next two films also work on such principles. In fact, in one of the articles, I think that's efficiently not wrong, who says the Gandhian politics brought a kind of a motherly grace to the question of political struggle. We always believed in winning wars through struggle, through forceful methods, which is basically masculine, which is basically whereas Sai Saheba doesn't do any of that. She wins over the son, she wins over others through sacrifice, through giving up. And Gandhi says in an article, she says that's one of the methods of Gandhi's political.
Yeah, you're referring to Ashish Nandi's The Intimate, where he says the Kshatra, the patriarchal, the masculine is given up. And therefore the invocation of the Ardhanarishwara, the androgyne, the feminist principle.
And he says there are other two things. One is through this kind of sacrifice, like mother.
And that's why, if I can point out to you, after we had arranged a screening for Ashish Nandi, he remarked that it's a very, very profound Gandhian film, Sai Saheba, because it's the androgynous, the feminine, the mother image.
So, whereas my next two films, I deal with two other things of the same argument, and Dvipa and Hasina. In Dvipa, again, coming back to Ashish Nandi, it says the Gandhian, another way of Gandhian winning over things is through negotiation. Not holding back to your views, but then, meeting it on certain give and take kind of thing. And that becomes the principle for my second film, the Dvipa on this trilogy, loosely connected. There, Nagi struggles with the nature, but she negotiates and then finally wins. The third is Hasina, which where she demands justice through Satyagraha. And in that sense, I modeled these films on those concepts.
But there's also another important dimension there when you turn to Dvipa. It's not just Nagi, but you're also, in a Gandhian sense, interrogating, critiquing the issue of modernity, of huge development, dams, and we also need to look at somebody like Meda Patkar, the Narmada Valley project, Sardar Valley project. So it's also a critique at another level, and this I would also say is the Gandhian influence on you, of critiquing major developmental projects, displacing communities, displacing Adivasis, tribals.
I have dealt with these themes in other films also, like say for example Manu. There again, I deal with this kind of a modernization, organization,
and the loss of self-identity, individual identity.
And here, of course, in Dvipa, I talk about destruction of because that's one of the reasons I keep saying it's not about the destruction, it's about subversion. The film is about submersion. Submersion of the geographic entity, submersion of the individual, submersion of the family, submersion of the self-esteem.
And also annihilation of a cultural ecology.
So I put these three films in one loosely knit trilogy of Gandhian composition of story.
Now let me turn to the third film in the retrospective, Riding the Stallion of the Dream, Kasaravelli. It's a very strange departure because from the modern urban world, from questions of history, issues of history, you turn to a very mythical world, and that's the Siddha. My questions are: one, did you find it necessary to turn as an ethical cultural compulsion that we in the urban world, rational, modern, scientific, let's use all those terms, have not really understood community visions, community beliefs, faith patterns, schemes of faith of different communities. So we really do not know what myths are all about. And we really do not know what the relationship between myth and history is. So my first question is, in Riding the Stallion of the Dream, Kanasembo Kudriyaneri, based on a short story. Now, was it an ethical compulsion? Because you see, these are days when, in the name of third world literature, third world culture, people have also become sensitive to the issue of mythology, the mythopoeic imagination. So were you just making an accidental journey? But my own feeling is you are making a very considered journey into the world of myths. One. Second question is that there are different versions within the film. Aria's dream, whether it's a dream, reality, whether myths really take place, whether myths really have a rational basis or not. So certain things are repeated in the film. You see, it's very different because Kurosawa had done it in a different way in Hiroshima. Alan Rene had done it in Smoking, No Smoking, different version. Tykwer had done it in Run Lola Run. But your take is different. Your position is very different. You are offering cultural alternatives without privileging. My own reading of the film is you're attacking the privileged positions of the modern scientific urban world, which begins to dismiss all these as superstitious. The myth is unscientific, and therefore those who live in the world of dreams, of myths, are all stupid people, primitive barbaric. So I thought that was a very creative and a very ethical intervention into the world of myths, of mythology, what we would call the mythopoeic imagination. Could you deal with these things?
Yeah. Riding the Stallion of Dream is based on a short story by Amrish Nandukani. It's basically about three dreams. Dream of Iria the gravedigger, dream of his wife Ruthri, and the third dream is probably it's our dream. I'll tell you why I say it's our dream. First of all, let us talk about dreams. What are dreams? We often say dream versus reality. For the man who has had the dream, that itself is real. For outsider, it is not real. But if you look at the man, what he has seen is real. So the question of what is real, what is real, I am asking this question. It's not real for us, one who has not seen the dream, but one who has experienced the dream, it's real. So I wanted this snake and serpent and the rope analogy here. What is real? What do we mean by real? And but we also should understand one thing: what the logic that applies in the so-called within quotes real world doesn't apply for the real world. Sorry, dream world. Similarly, what applies here, it applies in the mythical So we need to understand the happenings of what is in the mind, happening in the myth from a different perspective. So what I use is, I used a kind of a narrative which is bit difficult to explain through the logic of the fact and truth. It applies a different logic of me. In fact, when Fellini started using dreams and fantasies extensively, people researched because Fellini started his career in New York. He said, "How can you drop these social relations,
Especially in 8.5.
Then Fellini makes a very interesting statement. He says, "For me, the dreams, memory, fantasy, hallucination, everything is part of myth, everything is part of reality." I thought it's a fantastic statement. How do we define what is real, what is not real? Well, it's a major question we need to ask these things. The same thing I need to ask, I keep asking this about myths. How do you say certain things are myths, certain things are superstition? We need to understand it from different logic and different. I have made a film in, one film before this called Nine Shot of the Dog, wherein the main protagonist pretends that she believes in rebirth, reincarnation, and marries the man much younger to her.
And fulfills her own sexuality.
So now,
sexual desires.
what I do is in that film, I try to understand what is it that leads us in our life. Dharma, we say, not in that context, in the sense of religion or things like that. One which leads us. I said I created 3 women characters. The grandmother, it's for her, it's the faith which leads her. For the granddaughter, who she's being educated in the urban English, she thinks that rational and this one is the ultimate answer for her. And then there's the other thing. There are a lot of things which which happen all of a sudden, like the randomly, which also leads us, gives shape to our life. So I put all these things on juxtaposition and then realize, make a statement that we need to understand even the so-called myths and these things from a different perspective. Not the kind of a social realist perspective. We need to understand it from a different perspective. When I made this one, Riding the Stallion of Dream, I extended the same argument. How do I bring this out? That there is the fact is different from what appears to be fact, what appears to be truth. So that's why I use the technique of going back and forth, back and forth. You have 3 dreams, and each dream is repeated twice. You have 2 versions in each dream, in first and second dream. First dream is Aria's dream, and Aria goes and tells everyone that today the landlord, the chief of the village, is going to die. And how did he come to this decision? He come to that decision because he has seen his guru Siddha in that dream, which means somebody is going to die in the village. So he makes all the preparation, he goes and digs the grave and then goes to the wada and tells the people there that the chief is dead. But nobody believes he's not doing it. Because our acceptance of the real depends on the person who is narrating it. This area is a drunkard, he looks funny, he's darkish in complexion. He's wearing torn cloths He's drunk all the time. So, as an audience, I tend to believe that what he's saying is all all rubbish. So, when the first version comes, oh, nobody believes him. They throw him out, they show him out of the place. Then I repeat the same story. Now, with the same thing from Matadaya, the caretaker's perspective. Because Matadaya is a very saintly looking man. He's dressed, he's from an upper caste, he's dressed in white and he looks very clean. And he talks in a very sophisticated way. And we think what he's saying is truth. But when I repeat the whole thing, then I tell the whole story again. We know that what is Area has said is truth, and what Matadaya has said is not truth. Because he is hiding the truth for some personal gain. So by this technique, what happens, I know, I have seen this in a lot of, in many screenings. When Area comes and starts narrating the story, and everyone laughs. Audience start laughing at him because we tend to think he's saying all he's totally drunk. That's why he's imagining things. And when Matadaya says nobody is dead, we believe his version because he's looking decent. He has a very decent appearance and he's well dressed and all that. So our perception of what is real and what is truth depends on all these areas.
But I want you to comment on this. There are interesting twists and turns in the films. You see, when Rudri talks of Guru Siddha coming, everybody is scared. The shopkeeper gives her dole. People give it. Matadaya himself treats Rudri. So there is an inversion there. They believe in Guru Siddha. Second, Iri and Rudri lose faith in their own mythical patterns. And so on one hand, those who do not trust the man endorse the myth. Matadaya, the whole community, Guru Siddha comes. So they should venerate Guru Siddha. Whereas Rudri and Iriya lose faith in their own dreams. And this is important. The twist towards the end of the film is Guru Siddha himself undergoes demythification in the film, and he helps them begin a new way of life through agriculture because
that is the third.
So the third. So many things are put together.
In the second dream, what happens? People believe they don't believe Rudri, but they believe they're scared of Siddha.
So the myths are revitalized by those people.
Yeah.
Yes.
They want the myths to remain because they all have some kind of a gratification because of that. So Matadaya thinks all his sins can be wiped off by pleasing, by giving some listen to Siddha. But in the second, this is another twist which I brought in the film, which I like it very much. There's another character in the film called Vasanna, one who is traveling on the pillar. He's one man who's slightly rational thinking, radical thinking, slightly somewhat.
He's also progressive.
Yes. But there's one problem. In the second dream, it's he who stops Siddha from coming. And his belief is that if you can make these two people, husband and wife, Rudri and Iriya, lose faith, then they become active, they become progressive, they become proactive. That's also that is our notion of so-called radical rational thinking. We think if we make them realize that their myth is wrong, we are going to make them progress, which is wrong. That's why in the third story, which I said is hypothetical, which is probably our story, is the story wherein, as you rightly pointed out, Iriya and Rudri both treat Siddha like a human being. when Siddha says, please offer me the food, he says, wait here, let me first do my job, and then only I'll attend to you. So thereby he treats him like an equal. And in the second one, in the third portion, Sita comes home. Whether it is in the real or imagination, I keep it slightly, in another zone. Rudri and Area both have lost faith in Sita. But in the dream, in the third portion, they treat him like a friend and they want him to, and he asks, what are you doing? He says, I'm still digging the grave. But I am still digging, but not for grave, but to plant trees. And without disobeying the Siddha, they say, give me. Siddha says, I'll help you out. So that's when he offers them to help him. So they have retained Siddha mythology, but they don't do that kind of a demeaning label. So this is the kind of the dream which is actually my dream. Without discovering their beliefs, but with giving a kind of a dignified response, they achieve the results. So that's why the third portion depends like that.
Now, this is a question which takes us to other fields. Why is it that in various ways, when we come to the modern structures of our society, modern times, why is it that you turn to myths more often and you recontextualize myths? If, say, Kanasemba Kudriyaneri has one kind of a mythical structure, Nai Neradu, where you turn to this myth of reincarnation, but you subvert the myth. But more important is, when you come to modern history, you invoke the Kurmavatara, Vishnu as the incarnation in the form of a tortoise, a Kurma, to save the world. So my whole question is, why are you in the present context, when you deal with political questions, as you deal with Gandhi, not Mahatma Gandhi, but Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi within the internal life, when you look at the collapse of the democratic structure of Indian society, the collapse of politics, the emergence of corruption. So whether it's women and their mythical worlds, their mythical realms, or the socio-politics of our country in Kurmavatara, tell me, as somebody who is part of a very modern rational consciousness, why is it that you invoke myths? And for what creative reason do you establish an engagement, a juxtaposition between myths and modern histories? Whether they are the histories, existential histories of women, or about our body politic, about our social. It's very interesting that you repeatedly turn to myths and you use several processes of creativity, creative processes, while dealing with myths. Why? What is it that prompts you to keep invoking? There's a repeated invocation of myths. And so what is that relationship between myth and history? Predominantly when you deal with individual structures of belief or social structures of existence.
See, we often tend to misread myths because we try to read from our radical rational perspective. But myths needs to be understood from a different perspective altogether. This logic of action and reaction, or this logic do not apply there.
Or cause and effect.
Cause and effect doesn't work there, do not work there. We need to understand it from a different perspective. And I used to interact very closely with Dr. D.M. Nagaraj, and once he brought this insight into this myths and superstition and the beliefs and all that, he said we need to understand it in a very different way, not simply not becoming by not dismiss it altogether. We try to go beyond that. See what happens, there are certain things when a class of people, when they are not allowed to express themselves in a very realistic way, they tend to make a myth or make a kind of a this one out of that, faith of that. So if you go beyond this cause and effect, then you see the point. And even the myths, if you understand it from different structure, different standpoint, then we see a different structure, we see a different point. And I have been lately trying to understand, even see, Gandhi has become a myth now. In Gurmata, I am trying to do that. And so we are trying to, it's very easy for us to make certain things a myth and push it aside. But people who believe in that, they see some kind of a reality in that. So I constantly keep on questioning myself, where is myth, where is politics, where is real, what is real, isn't this real, isn't this part of this conflict is also real. So I keep on bringing that in the last 3-4 years.
Now, I think at the present moment, we need to turn to two outstanding films. Outstanding for very different ethical political reasons. And I'm going to ask Girish to respond to these. One is Hasina, based on Banu Mushtaq's story. The other is based on Vaidehi's story, Gulabi Talkies. And this is very crucial for us going through a very, very difficult phase of history in Indian socio-cultural political life. Girish, it's in Hasina that you turn to very, very fundamental notions of ethics, values, and you raise major questions about Islamic jurisprudence. You see, when we turn back to the Shah Banu case and how every system, institution failed, the question of alimony. Hasina is a film that attacks fanatics from within Islam, who do not understand the notion of Islamic jurisprudence, who do not even know the Quran when it comes to divorce or talaq or khula, or when it comes to alimony. So Hasina is an attack against those fanatics who do not look at the liberative, the redemptive dimensions within the Quran. And in fact, Hasina is a film that goes hand in hand with the remarkable studies of Islamic scholars like Ziauddin Sardar, Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, who give a rereading of the Holy Quran, the Quran Sharif. So it's a comment against the fanatics who deny the possibilities of redemption. Second, it's also an answer, that's the ethical cultural politics of Hasina. It's also a people who dub the Quran, Islam as monstrous, feudal, always talking of the cruelties of the Sharia. So the outsiders, fanatic right-wingers, shall we say. So you have fanatics outside, fanatics within. But if you look at the nuanced manner in which Hasina the film unfolds, you begin to look at the marvelous aspects of Islamic jurisprudence. So this is about Islam, Islamic jurisprudence. So it's a different kind of cultural politics. And for people who say that there is no politics in your cinema, they must reconstitute their notion, their understanding of politics. Second is about Gulabi Talkies. Two films that are very important for our lives. Gulabi Talkies is about the construction of an enemy identity. And here the attack is against the media, the attack is against the corporate world which gives everybody a bad name, and in the context of the film, it's the Muslim. So the Muslim becomes an outsider. Our own Gulabi. So with the shift in identity, communities are divided, communities are broken, communities are fragmented. So the whole Hindu-Muslim equation, hatred, is manufactured, is constructed. So when you turn to Hasina, it's about revising notions of religion, religious cosmology, which was something that had already been done by Sarah Abu Bakr in Chandragiri Tirthali, translated into English as Breaking Ties. This, I think, is a very, very radical kind of politics. And I would say the cultural politics that informs both Hasina and Gulabi Tallis is also fundamentally ethical. So, can you deal with Hasina first? What took you into the structures of Islam, and then turn to Gulabi Tallis? Because Gulabi Tallis is about the modern world, the manipulation of communities, and the construction of communal identity. So, begin with your reference to Hasina and then to Gulabi Tallis.
For some strange reason, a lot of people try to put these two films in one basket and see they are similar films. They are totally different films according to me.
Which is what I am trying to point out.
Which you have pointed out very well, very effectively. See, for Hasina, she is it's a small community, and she is trying to find justice within the community. There are no other community people. And there, what I'm trying to say is something totally different. Do we, according to me, all the religious, this one, very fundamental, this one, they are all liberating. They are structured to liberate human. But it's only when they get institutionalized, they become oppressive. This applies to all religion. Here, you have a lot of such scopes for liberation within the community, within the text of Quran. But what happens is, the people who give verdict are not the people who they don't go by what is there in the Quran because they have already it's an institution now, and they try to set do's and don'ts. Like you see, I forgot to mention that even in Gatsabda, there's an irony here. What is actually a Gatsabda? Gatsabda ritual, if you know the original ritual, it's a ritual of emancipation, emancipating oneself. If a man doesn't have a male offspring, then there's nobody to perform Shraddha. That means they believe that only after Shraddha we can go to heaven. So if they don't have a male offspring, what they do is they perform a Shraddha of himself when he's still alive. Thereby, he makes that spot smoother. But in reality, what is happening? It's being used. The very ritual is being used to suppress the women who have not done wrong, who have
transgressed, violated a cultural code.
That code. So how did this ritual of emancipation become a ritual of subversion? Sorry, submission. This happens in every ritual. If you really go into their soul of the thing, it's totally different. This happens even, and that's what I discuss in Sina. There are possibilities to get justice for Hasina within the
religious framework of cosmology there.
But Mullah doesn't want it, Mutwali doesn't want it, the husband doesn't want it, because you have different kind of a social in our mind. So they don't get that. So I wanted to do a film which is completely within the Muslim community. They don't even speak proper Kannada, they speak different kind of Kannada. And you don't see any outsider in the film. And her struggle, I could have easily made her go to a court and seek justice, but I don't do that because I want to find whether it's possible here in this film. But in Gulabi, it is altogether different. Here, Gulabi has lost her identity. She is Gulabi. She's no longer Gulabi. She mingles with everyone. She's part of the bigger society, outside society. Where you don't see Gulabi, you see only once wearing, doing namaz with that white burqa. Otherwise, we don't even know whether she is religious or not. But then the outsiders make her accept the religious identity. So the two films are talking about two different things. Just because both are Muslim, centered on Muslim women, many people try to put in one basket. I'm glad you could bring out that differences. One is within the society, within their own community. One is outside their community, but they are made to. She is made to identify herself as a Muslim.
This is an open question for you, and I want you to comment on this. You see, when you look at Gatarshada, and especially a film like Manu, there is a certain attempt at creating symbols. When we look at your narrative style, when we look at your narrative structure, there's a certain kind of cinematic preoccupation with you. So you are more interested in craft, not to say that the thematic structures vanish, they don't, but the preoccupation with form. So one can see a very, very formalist kind of approach to cinema as a very, very serious student of cinema. But I want you to respond to this comment of mine. But when we turn to, say, Kraurya, that's a film you must refer to now, beginning with Kraurya, later on, the structures become rather simple, loose in a very positive sense. You're known, which means from formalism, you're also moving towards cultural discourses. And the opening shots of Gulabi Takis are very, very different. Am I right in saying that you are moving towards local cultural discourses? You are expanding the nature of your sense of form, that in the Indian context, especially with reference to Gulabi Takis, you are attempting some kind of an Indian cinema verite. And you can also see that in Kanasembo Kudriyaneri, not very rigid, not very tight, not going after symbols. That's why many people look at the symbolic structures of your films, commenting on the form. But more important for me, beginning with Kraurya, is the movement towards easy, free-flowing discourses, cultural narratives, which I think is also the search for an Indian idiom, an Indian form. And especially in Gulabi Takis, to repeat this statement, the first few shots, random, candid, as if it's the struggle to find your cinema verite.
Yes. When I made Manu, the form is not only decided by the content, I am also reacting to my own previous film, which is Tabarnakate. In Tabarnakate, I was more, I didn't go much into kind of a very formalist approach. When I got the feedback, I thought I need to change my idiom. And in that process, probably Manu was a little rigid. But after Manu, again, I thought, that kind of a formalism is not the right term. I still carry all the kind of preoccupations in other films, but I don't make them, I don't make the audience conscious of it. If you are talking about the color scheme that is there, color palette that is there in Manu, which is so obvious, I don't use it in other films. But color palette is there, right? For example, since we have seen Kansemba Kudre, it's picture here. So I'll just talk about the color scheme there. So what happens, in all other films, say for example, 9 year old or I said, it's a fixed notion about certain colors. We have a kind of a what we call as thematic constants, like the red signifies this.
Frozen ideas.
Right. So one can read the film using those references. While making the concept, I decided I should not have a thematic constant. I should still use a color, but not in that conventional sense. I dismantled the thematic constant thing altogether. But what I did was, like each character has a different one way of looking at it. For this man, for area, red is one dominant color right through the film, which I have used in Manu, which I have also repeated in 9 year very prominently. But here, for each character, the color is means something. For area, it is humiliation. Because we start with the color being splashed on the shirt. So you know that right through area, whenever he is humiliated, in that red is there. Right? For Shivana, the landlord, it's a prestige issue. It's a kind of a honor for him to travel in a red car. So I use red for in a different code. Let's guess a different kind of codification. For Hema, that's his wife, Yamita's wife. She doesn't want to stay back in the house, but then she's forced to stay in the house. So I use she wears the color sarees, and there the red becomes for in reference to Hema, the red is kind of a what's it? She's this one, holding her, she's handling the captivity. For Hema, the child, it's a playful. It plays with it. And for Siddha, it's a kind of a positive. So the same color, but I use it in different context. And I use red and all this. It's a some constant color, but it's a different meaning. Whereas I use Matadaya is the only man who is white all the time. It's wearing a white, very clean jubba and the he's the most schemy character. So the color himself becomes a kind of a complication. I have used the forms in all my, consciously in all my other films, but I've moved away from the structure, the style that I've used to, because I don't want people to notice it. The form doesn't come so openly in the film. If you really consciously look for it, you know what kind of lenses I use or what I'm expression, what colors I use, how movements are used, and things like that. They're all still use it in a very careful way, but it's not so obvious like what we do.
Ravendraji, could we take questions? Do we open it up? We've gone on for quite some
Okay.
time.
You can you put on the lamp please, because it become very dark.
Oh, yeah, like that. Oh, sorry. I forgot about it.
Now we can request the audience to put their
I didn't use the laser.
questions.
You're right. Oh, somebody has asked, will you please put on the light? Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, because it's very dark. So, well.
I didn't realize.
One Mr. Srikanth is asking, sir, how do you see the role of film society movement in Karnataka, specifically during the 70s, in relation to the paradigmatic shifts within Kannada cultural sensibilities and articulation? Mr. Srikanth, a question.
Uh, film society movement was very strong in the 70s. Not as strong as it was in Kerala or in Bengal. In Kerala, we had, I think, at the time something 100, more than 100, I think. But in Karnataka, in Bangalore, we had about 8 film societies, and all over Karnataka, we had quite a few. And today, if you're talking about 2020 or even 2000, post 2000, film society has movement has dwindled. There are very many reasons for that. I won't simply blame the organizers. Audience participation, the availability of films, and once the DVD started appearing on the, so people started buying it, and so they were not going to festival, film society. But I think the one which you are doing now, this this FFSI Film Festival, online festival, I think it will again re-energize the film society movement. What do you think?
But I think such retrospectives should really communicate the seriousness with which films are made, and with the seriousness and passion with which people like us comment. I don't think we can reduce cinema to something that can communicate easily. In fact, it has been quite a struggle talking about films. And I think such attempts, Fiprasky, FFSI, I think should rejuvenate cinema as culture, as part of our cultural landscape. And I think it's a very, very important contribution. So we need not be despondent, we need not be melancholic, and we need not be afraid if people say this is too serious. How can the common man understand this? And I don't understand this notion of the common man itself. Who is the uncommon man, the exceptional man there? I think Fiprasky and FFSI hereafter, using technology, digital technology, two organizations need to come together, work together, and I think some outstanding work has been done. And many webinars have been conducted. In fact, I have participated in all those webinars on Malayalam cinema, Northeastern cinema. I think, as Girish pointed out, well, in this world, and also thanks to this epidemic, we need to make use of our technological resources and come to terms with serious cultural issues, and in an intense, passionate manner.
Okay.
Just that comment, because it's very easy to be dismissive about popular cinema. It's very easy to be dismissive about the kinds of films that people like Girish make, saying, who will understand, how many understand, what will the common man get out of it? Now, I think we need to go beyond these very superficial questions and statements. And I think I must congratulate, as Girish to put, Fiprasky and FFSI for arranging for such a discussion.
There is another question from Mr. Parthajit Borua. He wants to know from Girish sir, you have taken almost 8 years for your upcoming film. Can you enlighten us on your new film?
Yeah, new film is, what shall I say, it's ready now. And I have used another structural device here. I have clubbed, it's a vision of true stories. And same preoccupations continue. And I keep asking the same question. When it's a title, Illirolare Aliga Hogalare, can neither I stay here nor move beyond. It's actually a kind of it's a line from a 16th century poet, saint poet Purandaradasa, which talks about the dilemma, eternal dilemma of the human mind. And I elaborate that in this way. It's ready now. I don't know. Once the pandemic is lifted, it will
And in fact,
right.
if I might intervene and say that it's about the transformation in the rural structure, because the rural world is facing a crisis. There's a sense of loss of identity in the rural world today. Many historical forces. So those who are there want to migrate. So one part of the film is about migration, about urbanization, looking for fortunes in the urban world. The second part of the cinema, the film, they are complementary to each other, is about people stuck in the urban metropolis, loss of self, loss of personal identity, and the need to go back to their roots. So there are cross migrations, if one should speak like that, of those wanting to make it big, looking for opportunities in the big cities because they cannot endure the feudal structure, and of those who have a loss of self-identity, the loss of the selfhood, who want to return to their returns. So they are complementary stories, and that is, can neither stay here nor move beyond nor journey beyond.
So here is a question from Mr. Shoumendu Bhattacharya. How an independent, small budget filmmaker can proceed in this world of big budget and social connection to fight and reach audience, festivals, markets?
It's a big question. I myself am not very clear about it. I make films. I leave it to the producer. I said it's your duty to find audience and then so because today actually it appears theoretically speaking it appears that things are much better than the earlier era, but in reality it's not so. I don't know why only in India we are facing this problem. In other countries, the digital platforms, OTT platforms, they have come to the help of small budget filmmakers, people who have made sensible films. But in India, it's opposite. Even the OTTs go after big stars, extravaganza, films with extravaganza. I don't know why this is happening.
Next question is from Mr. Manasha Manjunatha. It is addressed to Girish sir. Why is it so difficult to obtain high quality collectible editions of your films? There are many people who are very much interested in purchasing your film collection all over the world. We hope there will be something done to resolve the issue. Is there any answer?
I know that, yeah, I know that a lot of people want my film, but unfortunately, I've always worked with small producers, and many of them, soon after the film, they have shut their doors, and I don't even have any access to my own film. Whatever you are seeing actually are from my collection, which is just copied without before digitizing or even before color corrections. And I made all my films in celluloid, not in digital version. So I know right now the negatives are all rotting some godown. I have been trying to shift it to archives, even that is not happening because it involves huge money and who is going to pay for that. My producers are, it's a big money for them also. And not only shifting, now if you want to digitize it, it's going to be very, very expensive. Very expensive. Unfortunately, I have made 14 films, and to digitize at least 10 of them or 15 or 12 of them is going to cost bomb. So I hope something will emerge. Actually, my daughter is struggling hard to get some funds to shift these films to somewhere and restore it. Let's see something. Somebody asked the same question: why is it very difficult to get my good quality DVD of my films? That is the reason. I am not the producer of any of my films, and unless the producer makes his mind up, It's a bit difficult, and it's not just making minds up. It's also involves huge money. Unless we make some arrangement for that, and already, unfortunately, 5 of my films have been negative have been spoiled. Kathi and Money and Claudia's and some other films of movies. We have lost forever. We only have positive prints in archive, and somebody wants to tell somebody if somebody can do a good digitization from print, probably that will exist, otherwise they have lost forever. And I was told both Deepa and I said I started rotting, and we need to immediately do some work in saving some work to safeguard that.
Mr. Manu Vashishtha, he wants to know some advice for the FTII aspirants. If you have got any.
I think the selection process has changed a lot. You should speak to some of the younger people who have just passed out from FTI, because during my period it was totally different. Now it's totally different. And if you can take my number from Premendra and contact me on the phone, and be able to tell you whatever little knowledge I have of FTI and entrance system. Because I passed out in 1975, and after that, never gone to FTI. And, so I don't know much about the selection process and what is happening here. But I can put you in touch with people who are doing it now.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Mohantesh. He wants to know that in your film Gulabi Takis, in the climax, 2 old grandmothers watch switched off TV. What it means?
Well, what does it mean? You look at the image and try to extrapolate. What I was trying to say is our fascination for technology is so huge that we don't mind watching a TV which has not switched on at all. And it is a comment on over reliance on the new technology and new medium of communication.
Thank you. Mr. Nagendra Prashant. Hi, sir. While watching your movies, sometimes I could relate it to something that the movie characters may not be dealing with, or some frames which leaves it up to the imagination of the audience. Do you intentionally leave it for the imagination of audience, enhancing a wholesome interactive movie watching experience? He's asking.
Yeah, my films do not give you the final answers. I want audience to creatively participate in the film. I firmly believe a film which gives a conclusive, this one tends to numb the sensibilities of the sensible viewer. So that's why I raise certain questions. I show some directions on which one can search for the answers, and provoke them to find answers on their own.
Thank you. Ramesh Chand HC, he wants to know, it was wonderful insight into your filmmaking. Does the new normal, COVID, bring OTT more accessible to viewers and big screen? Does it even mean change in filmmaking to video films probably?
I would say video filmmaking, but I think it's a digital filmmaking. Digital filmmaking actually liberates, brings in new kinds of energy and new kinds of new young blood into filmmaking. In that sense, probably digital technology has democratized filmmaking process as such. I am very happy. The latest film, of course, is the only film which I have watched in digital and a lot of freedom in the sense, one need have to worry about crosstalk. One can experiment with, with the with the untrained artists and real locations and things like that.
Sridhar, he wants to know that most of your films are women-centered. They are the mothers without children. This has been a repeated thematic dimension of your films. Is it intentional or accidental?
I don't know, sheer coincidence. I tell you, I've been hearing this one that most of my films are about, are women-centric, which is not really true. About 7 of my films, of the 15 I made, are women-centric. The rest are all male-centric, right? But I don't understand this question at all. It's like it comes from a mindset. What is wrong if somebody makes a film about women? I know, yesterday also I was telling someone, people ask this question to Ingmar Bergman, people ask this question to many other who have women as the central character, but nobody asks this question to filmmakers who have only men as the central in the character. So what is wrong with it? If you don't talk about women, you are talking about men. Right?
Thank you. Another question, very interesting. Arun asks, you cannot deny the fact that a discerning audience tuned to serious films and a lumpen, fun-loving audience lapping up run of the films. My question is, with the onset of new generation and their technology, do you think they have the sensibility and patience to engage with the meaningful films you dabble with?
I think I'll ask Manu to reply to that question.
Well, the position would be this. If on one hand, I watch this so-called highbrow, serious cinema from all over the world, I am also a lumpen in the sense that there is no dishum film, Hindi or Malayalam or Tamil or Kannada that I have not watched. My point is, what does one do with popular culture? How does one take it seriously? How does one deal with the economics, the politics, without being contemptuous? And how does one, because you see, these are also days when one can be very dismissive about serious cinema, saying that it's not real, that it has nothing to do with the common people, it does not represent the aspirations of the common people, that it's made by people in a rarefied manner. So contempt can be mutual. Disparaging comments can be made about every film, every genre of filmmaking. My own position as somebody who would call himself a serious student of cinema would be that I look at the politics, the kinds of values, schemes, imaginative schemes that the so-called, let's use the word, non-mainstream cinema would use, promote. What does it uphold? What does it offer? And what's the direction that the so-called popular, commercial, box office cinema, what are the directions these films are taking? For anybody seriously interested and concerned about our social attitudes, values, political formations, I think we would realize that both genres are different, orientations are different, perspectives are different, but it has something to do with the direction in which our popular cinema, so-called serious cinema, the direction in which the two are moving in different directions. And therefore, if there is somebody fun-loving, lapping it up, the lumpen element, I would also, with great respect, and when I say with great respect, it doesn't mean that I endorse everything that's coming up there. I have problems, I raise questions, so I must be serious about it. And I must be serious about this too. So how do I balance the two? How do I take it together? Because all these I would see are products of my culture, of the politics of my times, and I am interested in the manner in which this society is moving. So what if you have people who are only interested in this murder, mystery, suspense, thrillers? Now, isn't that a very important aspect, a very important material for me to look at the choices that people are making? I would not look down upon it. And I would also fight for the kinds of attempts being made by people like Girish Kasaravelli. And therefore, for me, it's a very, very serious study into the nature of our times and into the nature of our societies rather. In fact, if you look at the underworld films, turn to Tamil cinema of recent times, Malayalam cinema, many films about the underworld, but there's a lot of authenticity to it. And therefore, I would be open to the possibilities of analysis, possibilities of understanding, and keep them separate and not be dismissed. So those who are the champions of popular cinema can brush serious cinema aside, and those who are very serious about the so-called non-mainstream cinema can be very dismissive. Now, my own position, because Girish has asked me to respond to this, is that I would take everything seriously and raise basic questions about the nature of our choices, of our film-going public. And the composition is heterogeneous, it's not homogeneous.
So, Girish, you are looking very tired, so let us finish it now. It's already 2 hours we have talked. Thank you very much for coming and agreeing with us to be here in this session. I think it will be very useful. Those who couldn't listen to you directly, this will be in our Fippeski's YouTube channel. It will be available forever. Anybody can watch it now from YouTube. There is the Fippeski India YouTube channel. Anybody can subscribe that free of charges and can watch it whenever they like. There are so many other questions, but already 2 hours over. And Professor Manu Chakravarthy, we are very much thankful to you for coming and sparing the time for this beautiful conversation. On behalf of the Federation of Film Societies of India and on behalf of the Fippeski India, we are very much thankful for this session. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.